Hey everyone, okay, so this is Jung again at Assault, and we're going to try to fix this poster. So this is a project of designing a typeface poster dedicated to the actual designer itself, using their style as well as implementing the Swiss style, and bringing some contemporary modern feel to it. So it's combining all of those together. So overall, the poster is nice. I mean, there's a nice balance between positive and negative space. And so when you're designing a layout, there's some fundamentals of design that you should probably be trying to hit. One is having a focal point. Second is having a hierarchy. And then third is having a balance between positive and negative space. And all of that can be brought together using a grid system. The Swiss style is very indicative of having a grid system. They have a column grid system with horizontal lines that break up the sets of information. So first thing that I want to do with this poster, and there's some issues with it. I mean, it has a nice balance, but it is missing some fundamentals like hierarchy. If you notice here, the volume of weight, if you squint your eyes and you stare at this, the volume of weight is split between Max, is the name, and also this image down here with Helvetica going across it. So they're competing for attention right now. So we're going to have to basically create a more obvious focal point and create that hierarchy. So we're creating a path for the reader or the audience to flow and move from one area to the next. Also, we want to make sure that the column system on this column grid system is consistent. So those are a few things that we want to tackle. And so here let's get into this. So first few things I want to do is I want to make sure that there is a solid grid system and consistent grid system. So what I want to do is I'm going to draw some guidelines here. So here's a guideline. There's a alignment going on here, and same thing here. So I'm aligning to the lefts of these columns. So I'm going to assume that these are the column systems, so which means that there should be a column here. So this looks like it's going to be about a 5-column grid system, which is fine. So, and then they have a little bit of a margin on the edges. It's a little bit off, but it's not that bad. Okay, so here's the column system. So everything should be aligned to that column, and looks like for the most part they did a pretty good job. You can notice that Helvetica is not aligned. The H in the Helvetica should have been aligned here. A little bit confusing here with the last name. There is a grid system actually. Oh, there you go. So you do have a grid system, which is nice. So let me fix my guidelines. Let me unlock it and then move one of my guidelines over. So there it is. So I was pretty close. Let me move this guy over a little bit. So they are working on a grid system, which is really nice. So there it is. And they're trying to use a modular system as well, but you can see that they were kind of breaking that here. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this and I want to make that visible. So I'm going to take all of that and let me see, where's my tools? I'm going to actually color that. So right now it has no color. So what I want to do is I'm going to take it and give it some color so I could refer back to it. So I'm just going to pick a green color. Let me see if he used it as a guide. There it is. So you can kind of see, if we zoom in here, you see the grid system. Okay, so I'll just leave it at that. I'm gonna leave my guides alone as well, and then later on we can turn this off and on. So it's a good thing if you do have a grid system to make it visible. So right now, let me see why this is looking so short. Oh, so the percentage opacity on this is set at 45%. So I just brought it up to 100, and then I'm gonna lock that. And then luckily they did the smart thing. They actually had it on a separate layer when they designed this. So there's my grid, and it's a smart thing to also label your layer so you know what you're doing. So let me see what turns this on and off, what's on this layer. And on this top layer, doesn't really look like there is anything that turns on and off. So this is going to be the artwork layer. And then this is just the extra layer that they were working on. Alright, so anyways, let's get on this. So, a few things. I'm glad they drew the grid system and they've aligned it, but there's some issues going on here. So again, let's tackle the hierarchy issue. There is definitely a hierarchy issue. Bottom portion and the top portion are competing for attention. So what do? We solve that through either making one a little bit larger or and possibly making the other element a little bit smaller. I think with this particular poster, if we make this picture any smaller, I think it's going to start to really lose its effectiveness. So what I'm going to do is basically increase these guys up here, their last name, and maybe blow this up a little bit. Alright, so actually let me lock my guides because I have it unlocked. So I'm going to take this last name and I'm going to increase the size of it, and as you can see, it kind of I made it larger and it kind of goes off the page. But as I make it larger, you can notice that my eye starts to go there more immediately and not really drawn down to this section. So I want to draw more attention to it. So the design, you know, I can see that they're trying to push the innovative idea with these diagonal lines, bringing in an element to create movement, but still, you know, have some different feel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this last name up and maybe either move it over here, or I could move it aligned to the middle section here. So we still have the last name, and it's larger, and it's starting to look a little bit stronger than the elements down here. And we're going to change that. We're going to modify this so it doesn't compete with the elements on top here. So one of the other things that I want to do is on the focal point, we're trying to make this all into a focal point. I think I want to make this name, his first name, a little bit larger as well, so we really draw attention to it. So there it is. The other thing that I want to do now is I want to de-emphasize. So what we did was we emphasized the top portion, and now we want to de-emphasize the bottom portions so they don't butt heads. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this whole Helvetica, and it doesn't really make sense that this Helvetica is right in the middle of Max's picture. It just cuts through it and it doesn't really work together. If anything, his name should be down here. So what I think where I think this belongs is probably with the sample of Helvetica here. So first of all, I'm going to bring this up a little bit, draw some more attention to this, and line things up. And I'm going to take this Helvetica and I'm going to reduce the size of it and align it to the sample and use it as a caption for the sample itself. And so now when we look at it, we start to see that it's a little less emphasized, right? And let's do some more alignments here. We've got these great column system going on here, so let's use that. All right, and then bring this picture up. Possibly kind of get away from being stagnant. One thing nice about what they had going on before was that it had a nice movement, a nice balance, and I kind of threw that all off. So we're gonna have to fix that, and so maybe part of that issue or fixing that would be to maybe take this type and bring it over here, and so there's a movement flowing this way. Which also means that I'm gonna have to take the text and move that down. So sorry about that. I want to make sure you guys see this. I'm going to take the text, bring that down, and then align these texts together. So now there's a more of a flow going down this way, and then kind of jumps back over to Helvetica. And I'm still having a problem with this balance here though, because even it just seems like the bottom just off is kind of flattened out now. There's a big heavy weight on the bottom, and I don't think Helvetica is working that well now there, because it kind of makes this into a large column of information. So what I want to do with Helvetica, I'm going to move it down below. So the sample for Helvetica actually can align with the bottom of the information image. So now the movement is this way, right? And I think even here, I think we could even move it down even lower. So I'm going to take this guy and move it down lower, bring this sampling down. So now there is actually a movement. If you notice, let me hide my guides. There is actually a movement going from here, the focal point, down to the image, and then down to the sample, right? So it's a fluid movement from the top to the right, top left to the bottom right, and back to the left. So there's like a curvature of movement going on. So that I think that's a pretty simple fix. And if I get rid of the grid system, it's a nice balance and it looks pretty nice. But we've got to fix some. I'm going to bring the grid system back up, and we got to fix some issues that are still lingering. And for instance, this 1957, I'm going to bring that down so it's no longer hidden underneath the name that we just broke up. And then the other thing is, I think these texts, there's some issues with this text. We want to again reminisce this to feel Swiss, and some of the details of Swiss were the column systems, but also besides the column systems, the other things that made Swiss was the obvious horizontal line breaks that distinguish the titles from the text, as well as the sections of paragraph from each other. For instance, so if we go in here, we have born December. So this is information about his birth and where he's from, like kind of like his identity. And then about his style of design, it talks the next paragraph. So it talks about Max was trained, da 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 da. So maybe this information should be moved down a little bit, and maybe we should add titles to this. I know it looks very clean and etc. and so on, but it just seems a little kind of too bland. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of the let's fix this paragraph, and he's missing a lot of punctuation, took evening classes at Zurich in information, etc etc. And so here this is a if you guys can see this, we are running into an issue with a widow hanging on the lines by itself, or a single word hanging on a line by itself. So how do we fix this? Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a tricky thing here. So let's first of all see. Let's select this. And let's look at the type text box and see what the letter spacing is, and it's all regular 100% letter spacing. You can see that here, tracking, and so it's the classic standard. So there's a couple of ways to fix this. You can either do open up the letter spacing, or you can tighten it. I don't think we want to tighten this anymore. So let's kind of let's open this up just a little bit. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to like 25%, which opens it up, you know. And I think maybe we can go a little bit. There's a little weird paragraph. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize for knocking the camera. Period. And also, whenever you're working with paragraphs and text boxes, you want to minimize it as small as possible, because you don't want to have it touching and overlapping on other image boxes, because then it just becomes cumbersome. So let's see what we can do. I think what I want to do is, there's a lot of ragging going on here, and so I think the best thing to do is just knock this word over down to the next line, and that solves that paragraph. And then we've got the same issue here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this text box and I'm going to select it. Oops. I'm going to select this guy. And let's widen it up. Let's be consistent. So I believe, let me see, what was this? We went to 25 for the letter spacing. So we're going to change that to 25. And that right there, boom, kind of fixes that. And I think this looks okay, but the ragging is really bad here. So let's take this also, and let's take it to 25, and let's see if that does anything, helps us or not. 25. Yeah, that opens it up, and it doesn't look as bad as before. And you can do this too. You can finesse a few things. For instance, here, if you notice, Helvetica Typeface Max, it really is far in from the right edge of this particular paragraph box. Also, if you notice, these paragraph boxes are not all consistent as far as width goes. This extends away from and passes the the column, and so same thing's happening here. And his column gutter space is really wide. But so let's make these consistent. If I bring this out here, you'll notice that it starts to reset things, and that's not always a bad thing. But here we start to get back into this whole widow thing, so maybe that wasn't the best move. We'll leave that one alone. Leave that alone. But this one definitely does need to come out because it was way smaller. And so as we do this, you're going to notice even on top of this paragraph that there is a pretty big gap for the ragging. So you know, we can't really go in and remove some of these words up. It's just going to be really hard. So what I want to do though is I want to just fudge it a little bit with the actual letter spacing. I'm going to open this up a little bit more. So I'm going to go to like 75, push it out a little bit. It doesn't look that bad. I just wanted to fill that gap up a little bit. So that was the point of doing that. And then you can do the reverse of this too. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to finesse this bottom section. So you know Helvetica is broken up. So right now, let's see what I can do. Either I can bump this over and we'll get the same issue that we've got on here in the 1957 is far out there. And so maybe 1957 needs to be pushed over. And so that kind of solved that. And what I can do is I can take this line and bring this out to be about 75. Fills up some of that space. And then what I can do is take this guy and do the same thing. So I'm kind of playing around with the letter spacing to kind of make that rag not feel so extreme, have big valleys. You want to always avoid having big valleys. I'm going to come back here and I just noticed that this is kind of also starting to look really awkward. So a couple of things that I want to try, probably bump that over. I'm not sure if I need to bump these guys in and out or not, because then if I bump this guy over, it's going to have a really big gap. That's not bad, but this isn't bad either, so I'm just going to leave that alone. But what we do want to fix, these are small, these things may seem small, but they're really not. They're not small. Why? Because this is a poster, and this is the minimal number of information that's on this poster, so people are going to be paying attention to this information. So let me move some of this boxes around. So if I got rid of the bottom layer, you know, you notice the type. The type is there. It's there for a reason. It's there to be read. But again, it's not very reminiscent of Swiss style. Yes, there's paragraphs, but there's other distinctive qualities. The ragging right, flush left, but definitely the titles. So let's add some titles to this thing to kind of finesse this thing to make it look more Swiss. So maybe this is about his life. So typically in the Swiss style, usually the titles are all cap, not always, but typically a lot of them, and they're bold. So I'm gonna make this Helvetica bold. He was using Helvetica, so I'm gonna make it bold. And oops, and I'm also going to take this guy and actually put a bar underneath it that separates the information, right? And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other paragraphs. and then I'm going to put his education. Oops, I apologize for the oops, so you guys can see what I'm doing. I gotta pay attention to the camera too. His education, or maybe not his education. This is his training. Let's just call it training. And then we'll create the same thing here as one of his, and this is his work. Okay, so we created 3 titles. So when we zoom out, we start to see a little bit more reminiscence of Helvetic or Swiss style. Oops, I'm sorry, I apologize. I gotta pay attention to my camera. So we've got the breaks. I'm gonna add a little bit more break between the paragraphs so we can have some spacing, distinct spacing. So there it is. So we've increased the actual the title. We've lined up the grid system, and then we moved the image around, and we made a focal point. And I think some of these I don't mind these diagonal lines. I think they're a good use of creating movement, but there's a little bit too many. I'm going to get rid of some of this. I'm going to get rid of the one on the bottom right here. I don't think we need it. I think the simpler the better. And then like this is okay. I think having 2, but I like the simplicity of this movement here. So you read Max, and then you see the line move you down from Max down to his last name, which brings you across, and then it drops you off here, and there's a line that moves you down to his picture, and then as you flow across the alphabet sample and you see Helvetica, it leads you off the page. So I think that's a very good movement. I think overall there's a good sense of negative space and positive space. We want to space these out evenly. I'm just kind of eyeing it, but if we wanted to do it correctly, we would probably take our time to do it mathematically and just draw grid lines and guidelines. The other thing that I think maybe this could use a little bit of is I think it can use a little bit of some just more stronger horizontal lines to kind of again re-emphasize the Swiss style look and feel. So I'm just throwing in a few lines here that might make sense to kind of reiterate. And I always like to do things in 3s. That's my little thing. Some people like. So I'm not sure where the video ended. So what I'm doing now is after I made the adjustments and the fixes, I saved the file, and I'm going to basically take this file now, and I want to put it next to the original file so we can see it. So I want to save this. I made some other minor tweaks, and then I'm gonna go and open up the original. There it is. So I'm gonna take this guy, copy it, and I'm going to create a new artboard. And I'm gonna do a. There it is. Okay, so apples to apples next to each other. Let me move this out just a little bit so you guys can see the difference. If you compare these two together, I think that you would have to agree the left one has a stronger focal point, pretty good movement, and it's a little bit more filled up than the right one, definitely more negative space. So maybe I see that right away, so maybe we need to play with this and just kind of, we don't have to make it that big. And I think that helped a lot. I think that was feeling a little heavy, and just making that, minimizing that, I think just popped it and made it well balanced. So there it is. So it was a quick fix. Some little things that, again, that as a designer, that, you know, just takes time, practice, and some of the things that we touched upon. Focal point, right? Aligning everything, movement, hierarchy, focal point, movement, hierarchy, and being consistent and reminiscing, and again, re-bringing in the idea of the Swiss style. Here it just felt like just a regular 2-column, 3-column paragraph design, whereas here we're starting to feel more Swiss, right, and consistently about what Swiss style is about. But I do like the new lines. I like the innovative stuff that was brought in. I think that's a good move. I almost think that maybe now that I'm looking at it, we could probably get rid of that one too, right? So we don't really need it. So there's a flow. So the thing that you should be paying attention to is this is basically a 2-color design. And when you have multicolor designs, you have to look at it as multi-layer design. So for instance, I want to do this for you really quick. I'm going to take these red lines and I'm going to copy them. And what I'm going to do is actually going to put on this. I'm going to delete it. And so we don't, like, I just deleted those lines, and the poster didn't really need it, but it does enhance it. It does work with it though. So now if I do an edit, paste in place, there they are. So there are the lines. So now I'm gonna I basically put it on the layer that was empty and not used for anything. So I'm gonna name them red lines. Okay, so there it is. So now if I turn it on and off, the reason I'm doing this is because I want you to understand that for as far as the movement goes, we don't need the red line. I want you to look at everything from a multi-layer perspective. So I look at my focal point, and in my black design, it moves down to the finish down here, and there's a nice flow. But if I bring the red layer in, it does the same thing. So there's a movement going on that causes me to want to flow along this path, right? And so together, they work really well together. So there it is, folks. Let me bring that and let me show you the two together again. The original and the new. And there you have it. So tune in to Assault if you guys, again, want to see more fixes, how to, whatever it is. You want to send me a logo, you want to send me a poster, you want to send me a layout design for me to kind of modify it and fix it and help it out. I would love to do that. Send it to either Jung, Jung, or Bob at skueat.com. All right, and again, if you like this video, if this was helpful, please like it, share it, and I just try to build up some momentum going here. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.